Good evening everyone and welcome to today's webinar on the art of learning, how to learn meta skills for programmers. I am Pranand Patil and I work as software engineer at ABC Trainings and I am thrilled to have you all here. Today we are not going to focus on coding languages or frameworks. Instead, we are going deeper into the mindset and methods that make programmers exceptional learners. This session is about mastering the skill of learning itself, which is the most important ability in our fast changing tech landscape. So let's start by understanding why this topic is important. The world of programming is constantly evolving. Every few months there are new tools, new frameworks and even new languages. What you know today may be outdated tomorrow. So how do you stay ahead? Not by knowing everything, but by learning how to adapt and learn quickly. So as you all know that the tech world is fast evolving. And the IT industry is a never-ending industry. That is, every day new technology or new tool or new software is going to get introduced, as well as any tool or any software or any technology that is outdated is going to get vanished. Okay, so any student aspiring to make a career in IT industry, okay, what he needs to do that, for example, if he wants to be a software developer, what he needs to know, that is, firstly he needs to have the base clear of programming language. That is, he should be familiar with C and C++ programming language, and on the basis of knowledge of C and C++ programming language, he will be able to learn any other more important or advanced programming languages, may it be core Java, Python, C#, .NET, or for example Go, etc. Okay, so while learning programming languages, what is the most important fact which you need to keep in mind? That is not only learning its syntax or not only learning the main concepts of any programming language is important, but you should also be familiar with the minute details of that programming language. That is, along with being familiar with the front end, you should also be familiar with the back end. That is, for example, if I define int a is equal to 10 semicolon, this statement in any specific C program, when you read that statement, what you understand, that 10 value is initialized to the a variable, or you can say that 10 integer value is initialized to the a user defined variable. But friends, do you all know that what happens in the back end? That is the 10 value is not stored in the a variable itself, but what happens in the back end is that the 10 value, that a unique memory address is allocated to the 10 value stored in a variable, and that 10 value is stored on that unique memory address location or on that specific memory address location. But now you may ask, then why we use variables? So for example, consider that you have defined a C program to display addition of 10 numbers. Okay, for that first requirement is for loop. But what happens is that so you need 10 numbers for that. Okay, so what happens is that, or for example, consider that in a specific C program, you have declared and initialized 10 values. Okay, and for each value or for each variable, you have assigned a unique value. So in that case, as I told previously, that in the back end, values are not stored in the variables, but they are stored at the unique memory address locations assigned to them. Okay, so if in a C program, if you have, for example, consider you have declared and initialized 10 values. So tell me friends, that is it possible to remember all the unique memory addresses No. So for our convenience, what we do, that is we use variable names. In the same way, let me make you familiar with one more example. One more example is that if in C programming I initialize two different variables with the same value, then too they are still stored at different memory addresses. That is a separate unique memory address is allocated for 10 values stored in a variable, whereas a separate or different unique memory address is allocated for 10 values stored in B variable. But if I consider this same example in case of Python programming language, then there what happens, or in case of Python programming language, what happens in the backend, that is first of all in Python, memory is divided into two parts. One is stack and another is heap. Stack stores the value, whereas heap stores the memory reference. Okay, so if I consider the same case, which case, that if I initialize the same value to two separate variables or two different variables in C. In C, what happens, that even if the two different variables are initialized with same value, then too they are still stored at different memory addresses. That is a separate unique memory address is allocated for 10 values stored in a variable, whereas another unique or a separate or unique or another unique memory address is allocated for 10 value stored in B variable. But if I consider this same scenario in case of Python programming language, in that case what happens, so as I told, that first of all in Python, memory is divided into two parts, stack and heap. Stack stores the value, whereas heap stores the memory reference or memory address. So if I consider that same scenario in case of Python programming language, there what happens, that for the 10 values stored in a user defined variable, a unique memory address is allocated. But for the 10 values stored in B user defined variable, what happens, that is the 10 values stored in B user defined variable points to the unique memory address allocated for the 10 values stored in a variable. So from this or after seeing this example, so what we can say, that both the values, that is the 10 value stored in A variable and the 10 value stored in B variable share common memory address. That is from this example, can we conclude that Python consumes less memory compared to other programming language? Yes. What we can conclude, that is Python consumes less memory compared to other programming languages, and you can present this feature as one of the important feature, that why we choose or prefer Python programming language over all other programming languages. Okay, so as I told you, that remembering minute details is very important. In the same way, let me make you familiar with another example. Another example is related to while loop and do while loop. Okay, may it be any other programming language, no matter in which programming language you are defining while loop or do while loop, but an important point related to while loop and do while loop is, I am going to tell about it. Many of you may not be familiar with it. That while loop is also known as entry control loop, whereas do while loop is also known as exit control loop. That is, for example, consider if you want to print 10 numbers. If you want to print 10 numbers using while loop, you can do it so. And no matter in which programming language you are defining that while loop, but how you define while loop in that case? That is, for example, int I is equal to 1, while in round brackets I less than equal to 10 or I less than 11, and in while block what you define, that is, for example, consider I am defining this example using C programming language. So in that case, in while loop, what you are going to define, that is printf in round brackets in double quotes %d comma I closing round bracket semicolon, and the next statement is your increment or decrement. Since we need to increment the value by 1, so we are going to define I plus plus semicolon. Okay, in this case what happens, that is the initial value of I is 1. Okay, the initial value of I is 1, and 1 less than 11. Okay, 1 less than 11. This condition is true. This condition is true. Because this condition is true, that while loop is going to get executed. Okay, but for example, if I initialize I value at initial stage, I assign 21 value. In that case 21 less than 11 or 21 less than equal to 10 condition is false, and in that case your while loop is not going to get executed even once. So from this example, what we can conclude that while loop gets executed if the condition is true. Okay, while loop gets executed if the condition is true, but if the condition is false, but if the condition associated with while loop is false, the while loop is not going to get executed even once. But if the condition associated with while loop is true, the while loop is going to get executed until the condition becomes false. So as I told you that if condition is true, then only the while loop is going to get executed at least once. That is in case of while loop, while entering into while loop, what happens that the condition is checked, and if the condition is true, then only the while loop is going to get executed. But if the condition is false, that is associated with while loop, in that case the program execution is going to get terminated at that point only, or the while loop execution is going to get terminated at that point only. So from this we can conclude that while loop is also known as exit control loop. But this same scenario is opposite in case of do while loop. That is in do while loop, what we do after defining do while loop, we specify the condition. After defining the do while loop, we specify the condition. So we can say that in case of do while loop, condition is checked while exiting from the loop. Condition is checked while exiting from the loop. So in that case, if the condition is false, then the do while loop is going to get executed at least once. But in case of while loop, if the condition is false, the while loop is not going to get executed even once. Okay, but in case of do while loop, since condition is checked while exiting the loop, so in that case, if the condition is false, the do while loop is then going to get executed at least once. Okay, so from this example, what we conclude, that is do while loop is also known as exit control loop. So these are the minute details, or the you can say that the important points or the basic points which every programmer or which every student aspiring to make a career or pursue a career in IT industry should know. Okay, and let me also tell you that only having the knowledge or only being familiar with the main concept or core concepts of any programming language is not enough. You compulsory or it's mandatory to know the minute details, because whenever you're going to attend any interview or for any job position that you have applied in the IT industry, especially in the technical round, your knowledge is tested by knowing how much minute details you know about that specific programming language, not by how much knowledge you have related to the main concepts of that programming language, because everyone is familiar with the main concepts, but only rare or only a few students are there, or there are only a few candidates that go beyond the main concepts and research related to the minute details. So minute details are very important. So remember this quote by Abraham Lincoln, that give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. Okay, so you can say that your ability to learn is that axe. Sharpen it and you will be prepared for anything. So I would like to tell that, as I told you, that not only having the knowledge of the important concepts of any programming language is important, but along with that, having knowledge of minute details related to that programming language is important. In the same way, not only you should be familiar with the syntax of that programming language, or or not only you should be familiar with all the syntaxes of that programming language, but your logic development should be also equally well built. Okay, should be also equally well built. That is only knowing the syntax of any specific programming language is not enough. Along with that, hand in hand, your logic development should also be well built. Both the things go hand in hand. Okay. So the next point is, or the next slide is about what are meta skills. So meta skills are higher order abilities that enable you learn, adapt and apply skills faster and better. Think of them as learning accelerators. Some key meta skills for programmers include critical thinking, that is analyzing and evaluating problems methodically. Okay, that is for example, if someone tells you to define a C program for swapping two variables. Okay, for example, if someone asks you to define a C program for swapping two variables, okay, or values stored in two variables, in that case what you need to know, that along with the syntax of C programming language, the important thing is that you should also know to build the logic. You should also know to build the logic. That is what is required for that programs, or how I can swap the values in two variables. So let me tell you one example. That is, you can swap values stored in two variables using the third variable. That is, for example, consider if 10 value is stored in A variable and 20 value is stored in B variable, and you need to swap value stored in both the variables. That is, you need to store 20 value in A variable and 10 value in B variable. That you can do using third variable C. That is how you can do. Let me tell you its logic. That is, first you need to assign the value stored in B variable to C variable. After that you need to assign the value stored in A variable to B variable, and finally what you can do, that is, you can assign the value stored in C variable to A variable. Okay, you can store the value stored in C variable to A variable. Let me repeat this logic. Firstly, what you need to do, that is you need to assign the value stored in B variable to C variable, and after that what you need to do, that is, you need to assign the value stored in A variable to B variable, and after that you need to assign the value stored in C variable to A variable. In this way what happens, that values stored in A and B variables are swapped. So we implemented this logic using third variable, or you can say that using a temporary variable. So in this way, not only knowing the syntax related to all the concepts of any programming language is important, but also logic development is important. Like, there are many programs which can develop your logic. Like, the one example which I told you now is swapping two variables or swapping values stored in two different variables. Next is palindrome number. After that there is Armstrong number. After that there is factorial program. Okay, then there are program related to star patterns. Okay, there are program related to star patterns. Then there is multiplication table program. So there are multiple programs which help you develop logic. You can search them on internet online and practice them. One of the platform which you can use for practicing programs related to C programming or C++ programming, Java programming, core Java programming or Python programming is, which I know and which I used to use in my college days, is Online GDB. Okay, there is one platform named Online GDB which you can use for C programming, C++ programming, core Java programming, then Python programming, C#.NET programming. This is the platform which I myself used to use during my graduation days for programming. Okay, so I would request you all, friends, to not only focus on knowing the syntax of all concepts related to any programming language, but side by side you also need to build your logic. That is, make your logic building faster. That is, along with syntax implementation, you should also know how to implement logic. and make a program work or make a program execute successfully. So the next is self-directed learning, that is taking initiative in your learning process. That is you should not keep your knowledge limited up to the main concepts or up to the concepts or up to the syllabus of that specific programming language. You should not keep yourself limited up to that. What you need to do, that is, if there is any point in that you have some doubt, what you can do, go online and search that point, and as deeper you go in that point, or as deeper you go finding solutions or answers related to that point, the more you get knowledge about that point, or the more you get to know many more new things about any point. Okay, the next thing is adaptability, that is being open to change and flexible in your thinking. After that, next point is mental models, that is using frameworks to simplify complex ideas. So many of you not be familiar with what is framework concept. So in framework, what happens, that is the basic structure is already defined. What are frameworks or why we use frameworks? That is, in frameworks, what happens, that is the basic structure is already defined. You just need to do the main coding, or you can say that you just need to do the logic implementation along with the syntax that is required. Frameworks means what? That is, frameworks means what? That frameworks come with the basic structure. May it be the framework of may it be any framework related to PHP scripting language, or may it be any framework related to core Java programming language. What is framework concept? That is, framework concept comes with, or frameworks come with basic structure ready for any programming language, or may it be any scripting language. Okay. Then what is the role of user in that? That you just need to do the main logic implementation along with the syntax required for that main logic implementation. So in case of frameworks, what happens, that is, you don't get confused with the basic structure. Basic structure is already imported in frameworks. You just need to do the main logic implementation along with the syntax required for that main logic implementation. So frameworks can help you enhance your logic building. Okay. So, and these aren't specific to one tool or language, they help you thrive in any environment. And in today's world, or you can say that in today's growing IT industry, or in industry, when you are going to implement your this practical knowledge or as well as theoretical knowledge in industry today, what happens, that is, mostly frameworks are used. That is, as I told you, in what happens in case of frameworks, that basic structure is imported. You just need to do the main logic implementation. Let me give you a simple example of that if you are using Visual Studio Code, what if you want to, for example, consider you are using a Visual Studio Code, and in that you have created an HTML file, or an file with .html extension. And now in that case, in Visual Studio Code, what is one advantage of Visual Studio Code is that you don't need to type the basic structure of HTML script manually. What you can do, that is, on the first line define exclamatory symbol, and after that press enter key or tab key, after which the basic structure of HTML script gets imported. And after that, what you need to do is just implement the main logic, or just design the main body of that web page, or whatever is required, or whatever is the requirement of your web page. According to that, you need to implement only the necessary things. But basic structure, you can import it using the shortcut like I told you, that is, define exclamatory symbol, and after that on keyboard either press enter key or tab key, and the basic structure of HTML script is imported over there. So now the next mindset is about growth. The next slide is about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. That is, let's talk about mindset, a powerful foundation for learning. that is psychologist Carroll identified two types of mindsets. One is fixed mindset and another is growth mindset. Fixed mindset believes that abilities are static, you either can't or can't do something. But growth mindset believes skills can be developed through effort and learning. That is, for example, if you are trying any specific program, may you be using any programming language, may it be C, C++, Core Java or Python. But while trying that programming language, if you give up easily, or after trying for example, consider after trying for 4 to 5 times, after that you give up easily, so it's of no use. You need to keep trying, you need to keep on trying, you need to research minute details related to any programming language. That is for example, let's consider if you have learned Python programming language, okay, and you may be only familiar with the important concepts or the concepts included in syllabus of Python programming language in your college, okay, but friends, let me tell you that much is not enough. With that, you need to do research on your own, and you need to manipulate the code or change it accordingly, and also accordingly observe the output. This will not only make you confident, but also increase your knowledge set related to that specific programming language. So programmers with a growth mindset embrace errors. They debug not just code but their own understanding. Remember, every mistake is a lesson in disguise. Okay. So the next slide is about how programmers learn. That is, let's look at how we typically learn as programmers. That is tutorials and documentation. First point is about tutorials and documentation. That is good for basics but not enough on their own. The next one is trial and error, crucial for understanding how things work. Now, trial and error. Let me tell you about trial and error. So, while defining any specific program, what happens that if you commit a mistake, and after that when you execute that program, errors get displayed on the output screen or console screen. But friends, what happens that only learning to define a specific program or only learning syntax of that specific program is not enough. You also need to learn to read the errors. That is, for example, if you have forgotten to mention semicolon at end of any statement in C programming language, then what error does it display on output screen? That is closing round bracket, colon, and before that line number. Firstly line number, after that closing round bracket, and then semicolon, not colon, sorry, semicolon. Okay, it says that what error it displays on output screen, that is line number, expected, closing round bracket, and after that semicolon. So if you see this error, it indicates what? That in the programming in that specific program, at that line number mentioned over there, you have forgotten to insert statement at the end of the semicolon. So you also need to learn to read the errors. Okay. For example, if you have specified int is equal to 10, or consider if you are printing a integer value stored in a variable, but you forgot to mention the format specifier. In that case, what happens? That the error shown is that statement is displayed, and over there that statement is underlined, and there it shows a arrow, or you can say it highlights that error, that where what is missing. Okay, but you need to learn to identify it. And know that format specifier is missing over there, and I need to mention the format specifier over there, and after that only my program is going to get executed successfully. In the same way, as I told you about minute details, there is one more point, that is difference between return keyword and print function. I know 200% or 1000% that many of you may not be knowing the difference between print function and return statement. But as from the first webinar I am telling that not only learning the main concepts, but along with that focusing on minute details is very important. These both the things, that is having knowledge about main concepts as well as having knowledge about minute details, should go hand in hand. So the next thing is mentorship and communities, that is learning from others speeds up your growth. Then the next one is project based learning, that is building real world applications, makes concepts stick. That is let me tell you introductory projects or mini projects related to programming languages. So all of you may be knowing about the keypad Nokia mobile or keypad Nokia handset that we used to use first before screen touch mobiles were introduced. So in that I know that all of you must have played that snake game which we used to play using that keypad Nokia handset. Okay, in that the snake game which we used to play, it is purely designed using C programming language. It is purely designed using C programming language. In the same way, today's modern mobiles which use Android operating system are designed using Android technology. I know many of you may not be knowing that there is any technology named Android. Okay, I know many of you, or we can say maximum candidates or maximum students may not be knowing that there is a technology named Android technology. Okay, first of all, or when I was new to IT, okay, to IT or IT industry, at that time I also never knew that there is a specific technology named Android. Okay, but when I was learning C and C++, at that time I got to know that there is a specific technology known as Android, and for what purpose it is used, that is, it is used for developing mobile applications. That is today there is no one who may be using keypad mobile. All of you are using screen touch mobiles, or Android mobiles. Okay, so the applications designed in your mobile are designed using Android technology, and it is also one of the important technology that has rapid increase, or it is in rapid demand. That is as you all know that AI machine learning is in rapid demand. In the same way, data science using Python, cloud computing, okay, Python programming, all of these technologies are in demand. But in the same way, Android technology also has a rapid growth or has a rapid increase, since in today's world no one prefers using keypad mobiles. Everyone go for screen touch mobiles or Androids or tablets. Okay, or Androids or tablets, and to design applications stored in that Android or in that tablet or in those screen touch mobiles, Android technology is important, because the technology which we use in laptops and PCs for designing applications is different from the technology that we use in mobile, or you can say that in screen touch mobiles or Androids or in tablets for designing applications. Okay, both are completely opposite, both are not the same. In mobiles we use Android technology, whereas in laptops and PC we use a different technology to design applications. Okay, so the next thing is about that project based learning, that is building real world applications, makes concepts stick. Now, as I told you this example, there is one more example that for example, using Python programming language, you can also design animations like, for example, you can design a Doraemon character. Okay, you can design a Doraemon character, or you can design a Pikachu character. Okay, you can try these mini projects also, which will not only boost your confidence, but you will also get exposed to new things, and you will learn new things or minute details which you never learned before, or which you will never get exposed to if you keep your knowledge limited to only the main concepts related to that particular programming language. So the next slide is about the Feynman technique. That is, it is one of the best ways to understand a concept. So the one of the best ways to understand a concept is by explaining it. So the Feynman technique involves choose a topic you want to learn. Explain it in the second step is explain it in simple terms, like you are teaching a child. After that, the third step is find the parts you struggle to explain. And after that, the fourth point is relearn and simplify again. So as I said that for example consider if you have selected looping concepts topic, may you use any programming language, but you know that across all programming language 3 looping statements are common. First one is for loop, second one is while loop, and third one is do while loop. Okay, so as I told you during the start of this session that there is a major difference between while loop and do while loop. That is, while loop is also known as entry control loop, whereas do while loop is also known as exit control loop. But you need to, not only knowing this important point is important, but if someone asks you to prove it, you should also be able to explain it. Okay, which not only increases your confidence but also makes other familiar with an unknown fact, which is very important. So after that, the next point is about explain it in simple terms. So first of all present that point in a simple manner, that is in a manner which you can understand. But after presenting that point in a manner which you can understand, you also need to present that point in a technical way. That is for example consider int a is equal to 10 semicolon. Okay, so how you can define that statement or say that statement in a one sentence, or pronounce that statement in a one sentence, that is 10 values stored in a variable. But this is not the technical language. The actual technical language is that 10 value is initialized to a user defined variable. The actual technical language is 10 value is initialized or assigned to a user defined variable. You need to present it in that way. That is during interview, while answering, you cannot just answer in a general language or in the language that you know. While answering, that answer should also contain the technical terms which are required. Okay, after that, the next point is about mentorship and community, that is learning from others speeds up your growth. And then last point is project based learning. So after that, the next point is that find the parts you struggle to explain. Do more research about it. Go in deep, and also find out what is important, what is more important about that, and also know that where you are going wrong, or what is required, or what is the main core concept of that point which is important that you need to know. After that, relearn and simplify again. So this technique forces you to identify gaps in your knowledge. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Okay, if you can't explain it simply, that is if someone asks you related to that concept, you should be able to explain it to that person in a way that in the first attempt that person understands that concept. Okay, but if you are struggling to explain it, then you need to rework on it, or explain it in such a manner that the person standing in front of you or to whom you are explaining, he should adapt it in the first attempt. or he should adapt it easily and never forget it. You need to explain it in that way. After that, active recall and spaced repetition. Active recall and spaced repetition. So next, let's talk about memory. Passive reading doesn't work well. Instead, use active recall. That is, actively test yourself. Don't just read notes. Quiz yourself. Spaced repetition. That is, review material over increasing intervals. It helps retain information long term. Tools like Anki and Quizlet are great for this. You can even create flashcards for coding concepts and syntax. Okay. So as I told you, so to make any programming language perfect, or to master any programming language, what you need to do is keep on practicing. Like as we say that practice makes a man perfect. So to master any programming language or be an expert in it, you need to keep practicing. You need to keep on practicing. The more you practice, after that you need not remember any concept, or you need not remember any syntax. If someone asks you, you are able to answer it within seconds, or you are able to answer that question in a flash of seconds. But if you don't keep practicing, you are going to struggle with the syntax of that programming language, as well as you are going to struggle with the logic development, because unless and until you don't know syntax of any specific programming language, you are not going to be able to build logic. So firstly, your concept or your syntaxes means syntax related to all concepts of that programming language must be clear, and then nextly you can move on to logic building. And both these points or both these pillars must be strong for to call yourself expert or to master that specific programming language. So the next slide is about mental models for programmers. That is, first point is abstraction. That is, focus on essential details. Now, focus on essential details means, as I told you that what you see at the front end, or what you see, don't only depend on that. Always have a habit of learning what happens at the back end. Keeping your knowledge or keeping yourself limited to only the front end is not enough. What you need to do, that if you define a statement, may it be using any programming language, always have the habit of knowing what happens in the back end. Like, as at the start of session I told that if I initialize a value to a variable at the front end, what I see, that a value is initialized to a variable. But this is not the same case behind the scenes, or this is not the same case at the back end. At the back end, what happens, that instead of that value getting stored in that specific variable, it gets stored on a specific memory location, okay, or at a unique memory location which is allocated for that value. After that, you also need to know difference, that what happens in C programming language when two different variables are initialized with the same value, as well as what happens in Python programming language when two variables are initialized with two different variables are initialized with the same value. Then the next point is about recursion. That is, think in terms of self-reference. After that, the next point is divide and conquer. That is, break problems into smaller parts. Now let me tell you about divide and conquer. That is, divide and conquer means what? That is, break problems into smaller parts. That is what you need to do. That, let me tell you what happens in the industry. That is, or when you are going to implement your knowledge. You are going to implement knowledge while you are going to work in companies, may it be small scale company or any MNC. There what happens that for example consider you are defining program to find out factorial of a number in C programming. So what are the main components of that C program or of this example? First one is documentation section, after that the next section is link section, after that the next section is global declaration section, after that the next section is main function section, and after that the last section is about subprogram section. Okay, now global declaration section and subprogram section, both of these sections are optional, but what about the remaining sections? So what happens is that, for example, consider there is a team of 5 people. So one employee, or consider there is a team of 5 employees. What one employee does is that he designs or defines the documentation section. The second employee, what he does, that he designs or defines the link section. What the third employee does, that he designs the main function section. And what the fourth employee does, that is he designs the global declaration section and subprogram section. Or for example, consider the fourth employee may define or design global declaration section if required according to program's requirement, and fifth employee, what he does, that he defines or designs the subprogram section if required according to program's requirement. So first of all, you need to learn to break the program into smaller parts. That firstly I need to focus on documentation section, after that I need to focus on link section, after that I need to focus on global declaration section, after that your main focus should be main function section, and lastly subprogram section. Okay, so the next point is about systems thinking, that is understand the interaction of components, that is how components interact with each other. The more models you know, the more perspectives you can apply to problem solving. So the next slide is about learn how you learn. So the next slide is about learn how you learn. So in the next slide, what we are going to know, that is metacognition. Metacognition means thinking about your thinking. That is, ask yourself, do I learn best by reading, watching, or doing? When I am most focused, what kinds of distractions block my learning? And then adjust your strategies based on your own learning style. You can even take learning style assessments to understand yourself better. That is, let me tell you a simple example. If you are learning C programming language, okay, or C++ programming language, what you need to focus on yourself, the important factor that you need to focus on yourself is you need to know that how you learn the best. Is you learn best by practicing more, or you learn only by reading, or you learn best by implementing that theoretical knowledge on paper, or you learn best by implementing that theoretical knowledge on paper. So self-assess yourself and know the areas of improvement as well as your stronger areas and work accordingly on that. That is, know how you learn the best, only by reading, or by practicing more and more, or by implementing the theoretical knowledge on paper that you have read or that you have adapted. Okay, so friends, in today's session I would like to stop here, and the remaining points related to the art of learning, how to learn meta skills for programmers, I will continue during the next session. Okay, so friends, thank you for listening to me patiently. Let's meet in the next session.